community, you work with people, and what happens when you get home? And this is what the neighborhood series is all about. You just want to what? Wind down, what's it called? Unwind, right? You just kind of want to let go. Even off the clock, when he wasn't in the classroom, did he not teach people? Mr. Feeney didn't care what was going on. When he was out working in that, was it a garden or something like that? He would still drop knowledge on Corey and Topanga. Oh, Topanga, ooh, amen, right? Okay, let's preach. Here we go. I'm just kidding. Hope's teaching in there so I can profess my kid crush on Topanga as I was growing up. But we know that so many characters in that show always encountered Mr. Feeney, whether it was in a classroom, whether it was in the neighborhood or wherever. He was always willing to just share knowledge and be there for him. And so it got me thinking, as we wrap up today's series, man, we've got a lot of good things coming up. We've got a lot of exciting things to do, to get out there and be the hands and feet of Jesus. We've been seeing several new people. We're coming off a summer of several salvations and the baptisms and just all that God's doing. We have the true definition today of a first-time guest, my man Parker. Parker's in the house, right? First time ever in church. Here he is, right? How cool is that? A lot of good things happening, a lot of exciting things happening. And here's the thing. We've got to look at how Jesus lived his life and what kind of neighbor he was. Now, he didn't have one place he called his home necessarily, but he was always out in the community. He was always out talking and being with people. And I got to thinking, my brain goes weird places, but I'm just like, you know, we all know the phrase, what would Jesus do, the question, but I thought, man, what about an HWJP bracelet? Y'all ever seen those? Somebody said, what is that? How would Jesus party? That's what I would do. Anybody ever thought of that? How would Jesus party? How would Jesus hang out? What would he do? How would he act in different crowds and in different situations? And he was out there in the communities, in the towns, in people's homes. He was with the people, which is so awesome. Jesus didn't find himself secluded all the time, which he did get away to be alone with God, which we all should be. But he was out meeting, greeting, talking, loving on people. And so I'm going to share with us Luke chapter 5, verses 29 through 32. We're going to use the Message version because it gives it so straight, and I love it. And verse 29 says this, Then Levi had a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with him. But the Pharisees, everybody say the Pharisees, and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect, get your minds out of the gutter, S-E-C-T, complained to his disciples, Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Now there's a word in that question that gives me chill bumps when I think about someone having the audacity, the gall, the guts to ask Jesus, how can you hang out with sinners? Now why would that question mess me up? Because guess who was asking the question? A sinner. We can get so caught up in religion, or, well, I go to church, or I do this, or we're all sinners, amen? We've all fallen short of the glory of God. There's not a person in here, you know I get pumped up when I start hitting my face, but you know that there's not a single one of us who has not had to experience that grace that we just sang about. There's not a single one of us that don't need the love that we're going to sing about for our last song as well. We have all fallen short, and here is a group of people who had the audacity to say, we're in this category, and you're hanging out with people in that category. How dare you? What are you doing? Verse 31, Jesus answered him, It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Man, God has called us to be the church. God has called us to get out there. And if you have been here more than like 2 weeks, you have literally, over the past 6 months, heard me talk about this 7,000 times, that we have got to accept people. We've got to love people. We've got to be there for people. Amen? You've heard it. I could have done a whole other sermon. The ending series was going to be on that. And I thought, you know what? They've heard it. They've heard it. They've heard it. You hear me say it again. We have got to accept people and love them. Jesus does not call us to condemn them. He does not call us to judge them in their hearts and say, hey, you're going here, you're going there. He calls us to love them, to help them, to be there for each other. But God will take care of the rest. We're just called to be available. Arms wide open, God. I've received your grace. Now let your love flow through me. So you've heard that sermon 7,000 times. So here's the thing. Because you've heard me say it so much, if you still haven't gotten it, or if you still haven't applied it to your life, I'm going to go to my last resort, the only resource I can go to try to, I've shared you scriptures, I've shared it from my opinion, that we would be the church to love people. And most of us, a lot of us, we've We've got that. But here's the thing. Who was our number 2 greatest neighbor in the history of television? Mr. Rogers, right? Listen to this quote from Mr. Rogers. This is why he messed me up not putting him number 1. Here's a Mr. Rogers quote. To love someone is to strive to accept that person exactly the way he or she is. Man, to strive to love someone just the way they are, for who they are, for how God created them. And we could think, well, what about the sin? What about this? Or what about that? Man, put that in God's hands. Why don't we just say, and we've heard this a million times, but now you've heard it from Mr. Rogers, so I know you're going to take it to heart. Amen? Amen. So now you've heard Pastor Nate and Mr. Rogers and Jesus himself through his word tell you to love people where they are. So we're not going to finish this series on that. We're going to focus on this. Okay, we agree. Let's get out there. Let's love people no matter what. But here's a big question. Our big idea is, what if I don't want to? What if I don't want to? Anybody with children heard, I don't want. And I'm like, there's not 19 A's in the word want, okay? I don't want to do that, whatever. We've all probably found ourselves for different reasons saying, I don't want a neighbor. I don't want to get out and reach people and talk to people, whatever. And we talked about practical reasons why not to. But today we're going to focus on one of the biggest ones. And this is hard. This is tough. This is easier said than done, which most of the sermons are because God wants to convict us and grow us and strengthen us. But here's the thing. What about loving those neighbors, which remember, your neighbor can be in your actual neighborhood or someone in your community who you work with, wherever. What about loving those people, we'll say, from HE double hockey stick? Anybody know what I'm talking about? That neighbor, that person that just knows how to drive you nuts. Okay? That neighbor that just, whatever your pet peeves are, is like all their personality traits. Okay? Somehow it's just like, man, if I don't like someone that's loud, this person is so loud in the cubicle next to me. Or if I don't like, kids running around, this neighbor has kids that run around. Whatever it is, there are people that we encounter. We just keep it real at Lifespring, okay? There are people we encounter that we just cannot stand. Amen? Amen. All right, that's the loudest thing we've ever gotten, but that's okay. Here's the thing. So we're going to talk about, if we agree we got to love people and accept them, but what about those ones that we don't want to? What about those people we don't like? What about those people that drive us nuts and get on our nerves? I'm here to tell you, this sermon series has honestly, for me, I was thinking about this morning, it's honestly been more convicting to me personally than encouraging. Like some sermon series, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm pumped up. That's so encouraging. For me, it's been convicting, man. Going up to a stranger and just kind of talking. Again, I'm the nerdy homeschool kid, okay? I'm just like, hi, my name's Nate. What's your name? I don't know. Now, once I get to know you, man, you're like, Nate, you are, all about people. But I have a harder time sometimes with strangers, that kind of thing. So this sermon has been so convicting for me, this series. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at different stories and different examples of why it's so important and why we're called to love those people we may not even like. I want you guys to say, what up, Pete? Everybody, 1, 2, 3. What up, Pete? Who is Pete? Pete is a guy, he had a family, they loved the Lord with all their hearts. It's a true story. That lived up north in a small town in Ohio. And I came across this story about Pete, and I thought, man, this is what it's about. Pete and his family, his wife, she just had a baby, all right? We've had several new babies here in the life of our church. And his family had a baby, and they're excited. But there was one major issue in his neighborhood. His neighbor's dog would wait until that baby fell asleep at night, which we all can appreciate sleep, amen? And would wait and start barking the loudest. Anybody ever had a loud barking dog? Oh man, look at the hands, right? And so naturally it drove them nuts. So the wife did, and I don't want to stereotype, but what most wives would do, what my wife would do, and they said, honey, go take care of that, right? So go next door, this barking dog is keeping our baby up, it's driving me nuts, please go take care of it. Well, the husband didn't want to, cause any drama or cause any issues, so he thought, I'm going to write a note, right? Any of us ever wrote a note? Any of us ever received a note? I'm that neighbor, okay? But he wrote a note, and he just walked over and kind of stuck it on his door, whatever, just saying, hey, could you please get your dog to be quiet? Just had a baby. Sleep is precious. After like 9, is there any way you could help out here? Well, guess what? Nothing at all happened, right? Time goes by, probably a week or whatever. Nothing happens. So the neighbor decides, the wife tells him, honey, go over there, right? Get over there again. This is driving us nuts. Our baby's not sleeping. Please go tell this neighbor to stop. And so Pete, the dad, the husband, he goes and knocks on the door, and the neighbor's name's not given, probably for privacy reasons, but the neighbor comes to the door, and Pete just, he loves Jesus. He says, hey man, how you doing? I'm your neighbor, I'm Pete. just had a baby, so excited. But man, your dog is just keeping him up at night. He's barking a lot, and I'm sure. Well, the neighbor was kind of like more defensive. Any of us ever been defensive? Nudge somebody next to you, right? And the neighbor's like, oh, you know, and so I was kind of, and you ever seen how like a conversation that's already kind of awkward anyways, right? And then how it kind of just increases the level of intensity, right? So at first it's kind of like, oh, he's being defensive. It's kind of like, okay, well, your dog's still barking, you know, it's still loud. And he gets defensive, and eventually it gets to the point where Pete gets upset. And he's like, okay, you're not hearing it. You're not hearing what I'm saying. I'm not hearing what you're saying. And they agree to disagree, right? Well, guess what the problem with agreeing to disagree is in this situation? Neither one of them resolved anything, right? So he just leaves mad. The neighbor slams the door mad. And we're going to pick it up at the end about what ends up happening. But let me tell you, we've all probably been there, right? Where there's kind of that conflict, kind of that moment. If you have ever encountered someone that doesn't see eye to eye with you, if you've ever encountered someone that has different beliefs than you, the different agendas than you, or different opinions than you, it can tend to, whatever the subject is, it can tend to just kind of increase in intensity and kind of go here. And so I want us to look at, what do we do when those moments happen? What do we do with those people that we just honestly can't stand? Let me give you some practical tips and look at what God's Word says about it. But the first thing is this. Let's evaluate the situation honestly. Let's look back, take a deep breath. Any of you have to do this with your kids, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Hope has to tell me to do that all the time, right? Just get a deep breath, get that oxygen to the brain. Let's calm down. Here's the thing. Let's evaluate the situation for what it is. Now, disclaimer. Sometimes situations are dangerous. Sometimes situations are bad, and we should get heated, you know, get authorities involved or whatever. But many times, it's just little annoyances. It's little things here or there that if we would just be willing to put it in perspective and say, you know what, okay, it's not that bad. Let me look at it from a different angle. Let me see what else, how else I could handle this. But just to evaluate the severity of it, man, this day and age, I'm telling you, it's crazy. We go from 0 to 100 immediately, right? Sometimes cops could be involved, lawyers could be involved, and you're like, I don't even remember what the issue is, but I've just spent a lot of money on lawyer, whatever it is. Like, we just go there right away. Our times say sue right away, get back right away, make sure that you stick it to them right away. Make it as bad a situation as you possibly can because you are mad. What's the new word these days? You are triggered. Everybody say triggered. Triggered. All right. So you get triggered, so you're going to get them back. Your emotions are high. You're upset. They're upset. And 9 times out of 10, if you would just evaluate the situation before you go there, you'll probably realize, okay, it's not that bad. I can get through this. Maybe it's just a conversation. Maybe a text could solve this or whatever. Romans 12, because here's the thing. Here's the part that's hard about today's sermon is, as believers, it is biblical, it is a fact, we are called to be different. If you claim to know Jesus, if you've accepted Christ into your life, He tells us to live by a different standard. He calls us to go about things a different way. And so when things might happen that upset us, when things might come at us that are frustrating, God calls us to handle it as Christ would. Romans 12, verses 18, verse 21 say this. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I love how He doesn't just say live at peace with your family, live at peace with your best friend. Live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Ooh, that's hard. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you, as you're hearing that scripture, you think, okay, let God be the judge, let Him, punishments are coming from God, He's got this. Okay, if they're hungry, give them food. That's kind of tough. If it's your enemy, somebody you don't like, oh man, if my enemy's thirsty, I got to give him a drink. And so you're kind of reading that, you're hearing that, you're like, okay, that's tough. And then all of a sudden it says, throw some hot coals in their face. And you're like, there we go. Amen. I got that part down. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Forget feeding them. I want to hurt them. Just so you know, in this case, back in the day, back in Old Testament times, when people felt like they needed, like they had major remorse or they messed up and need forgiveness, In Old Testament times, they would put hot coals like in a basin thing and walk around their head, above their head, and that was their way of saying, hey, I'm sorry. All right, so no, it's not a way to get back at them. It's just a way to show remorse and that you're sorry. So emotions, they also what get in the way, right? Emotions can take over really, really fast when you're upset. Emotions can take over really fast when you heard a sermon about being a neighbor. You know you're supposed to get out there. We know we're supposed to get outside of these walls, which we are going to do in some really cool ways. But what about when those emotions hit, as we talked about? God saying, hey, if it's your enemy, if it's someone you don't like, I'm telling you to love that person no matter what. I'm telling you to be there for them, to meet needs for them. I'm not calling you to necessarily have to hang out with them every minute of every day and be their best friend, but I'm calling you to love them. And here's a fact. Your goodness, your kindness can overcome evil. I want you to know that today. I want you to know that without a fact that you being willing to say, God, I'm going to handle these situations different, and I'm going to shine light into a dark place, or I'm going to react in a calm way instead of an angry way, that can overcome evil. That's what God's calling us to do. Ephesians 6:12 says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the very powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Man, we think the enemy is that person in front of us that we cannot stand. When as a matter of fact, that person was created by God and is a creation that needs grace and that needs love and that needs peace. We think they're the problem. But really the problem is this evil battle that's going on between heaven and hell and good and evil and light and dark. And there's a spiritual battle going on for their soul. And sometimes, and this is what today's about, it's hard, but sometimes we are used by the other side to get to that person when really some goodness, some kindness, some grace, some forgiveness, some love could have changed things in a better way for that person. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 and 44 says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor. You just heard a whole series, week 4, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Right? That's what we're taught. Man, what is it called? Like, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Not to love them, but to make sure, you watch them or whatever. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, Jesus tells you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Somebody be really honest in here and say, that was and is one of the hardest scriptures for me to live out. Man, to love and to pray for someone. When someone does me wrong, man, I've had many situations. You guys have heard some of my stories in my past. I'd love to share more with you sometime. But there was a time in particular, about 8-9 years ago, that a youth pastor in the Carolinas, man, that was a super popular guy. He was doing great things. All the youth really looked up to him. And me working on Carolina Ministries, I worked with him a lot. And man, he had a moral failure, man. He had an affair with one of the youth girls' moms. He was married, he had a little girl, he was in ministry. None of us are exempt from temptation. Y'all, I hope you are praying for me as your pastor. I hope you are praying for our band, our worship leaders, everybody that's a part of what God is doing. Pray for each other, but pray for your leaders, man, because Satan's always attacking. And we are all one bad choice away from destruction. And in this particular case, a friend of mine, someone that I looked up to and a lot of students looked up to, failed badly. And I wish I could tell you that he failed and reconciled, but to this day, 8 or 9 years later, man, he holds like meetings in his local area now to get people to turn against God. And I mean, he just went from like youth pastor to, whoa, what happened, right? Sin and things like that. And I'm here to tell you, when I was preparing for this, and I've shared this before, but in that moment, I knew I was convicted and God told me to pray for him and love on him, but I prayed this prayer. And to this day, I believe it's okay. And I'd encourage you to do the same. If there's someone that's hurt you deeply that you just shouldn't be around maybe or whatever, maybe it's not safe, who knows, for you or them, whatever. But I literally prayed, I said, okay, God, I am not the person right now unless you like write it on a wall and appear in front of me like and have I am God and your name tag and tell me to, then I will. But until that happens, God, I know I'm not the person right now to be around them or reach out to them, but please put someone in their path that will. Please put someone in their path that will teach truth to them and love on them and be there for them. I will pray for him. I will hope that he's okay. Man, maybe you have an ex-spouse. I prayed for my ex-wife. Isn't that crazy? You're not going to hear a lot of people say that. I pray that she's okay, that she finds Jesus, that she's doing okay. But am I the one to go down? Would Hope let me go down there and do that? No, okay? But am I the one to necessarily be the one to do that? Not necessarily, but I still want what's best for her because she's a creation by God. And in this case with this youth pastor, man, I still wanted him to find. But what I was hurt about, you guys know how relational I am, how much I love students, teenagers, people. What happened for me that triggered me, that made it to where I'm like, I'm not a fighter, but I would have paid somebody to punch him in the face, okay? But here's the thing. All those students that had looked up to him, it gets me mad to even talk about it today. All those students that thought he was so cool and so awesome and that he would teach and this, when he did that to them, that was like, oh wow, see this whole Jesus thing, that's not for me. Now they still had to make the choice. I'm not saying it's his fault, but in ministry, a higher calling, a higher standard, he failed, and they looked at, and a lot of people across the Carolinas especially, all of a sudden began to question things or whatever because this guy failed and they looked up to him so much. So then they started questioning things. To me, that was what was hard. But here's the thing. We love those who hate us and we pray for them. If you are a believer in Christ, that's what God calls us to do. That doesn't mean you have to be around them. That doesn't mean you have to be the actual one to talk to them or reach out to them unless God tells you to, then you do. But here's the thing. God is calling us to still pray for them and still to love them. And that's going to free you. That's going to free them, and even possibly, when someone does come into their life, and they can do great things. Man, I'm getting old. I'm getting up there. Man, Hope surprised me this weekend. It's my birthday weekend kind of thing. I turned 35 on Tuesday, and I know after 35 years of life, there's a lot of people I can look back on, and I can say, you know what, that person don't deserve me to be nice to them. You know what, that person don't deserve this or that. I got another neighbor story for you. We have something at our house now that's kind of taken off a little bit. On Friday nights, we play volleyball in our backyard. If you like volleyball, if you want to play, come play. I say this with seriousness, and I'm not joking. You can join our league if you would like to join our league, okay? Yes, that's right, people. It has turned into a, let's play volleyball too. We have 4 teams, we have divisions, we have standings. We're working on a free agency waiver wire type system, but it has literally turned into a volleyball league in my backyard on Friday night. Saturday nights are for Busy Friday. Hope said 1 night a week you can have 20 people in our backyard playing volleyball. I'm like, thank you, you're the greatest. So that's what we do. We have a league. Well, guess what? I live in a neighborhood, right? You know what's included in a neighborhood? Neighbors. Imagine that, right? And so, literally, now it's a family event. We got kids everywhere. Everybody having fun. We're still working on cheerleaders and stuff like that. We haven't got that far yet. But we've got this league kind of thing going on. We play and have fun. Well, naturally, when it gets dark, it's like, oh man, it's dark. It's probably better to be quiet than anyways. Oh no, people. 2 of my buddies showed up with construction lights, okay? So now we can play until all hours of the night. My kids are blessed with sleep. They sleep through everything, which is awesome. And so we'll play, but I started to wonder, what about my neighbors, They've literally never complained. They've never said that I know of. They've never come over. They've never called the cops on us or anything like that. And so I'm thinking, this is cool. We're not doing anything terrible. We're just playing volleyball, probably being loud. Well, sometimes the ball will go over the fence. Have you ever, now how would you react? Have you ever been in your yard and maybe see a teenager or somebody jump your fence at 10 o'clock at night? And what's your first reaction, right? Oh, they're playing volleyball and they're just getting their volleyball, right? No, probably not. You're probably thinking, what are they doing? Well, we had to do that a few times. And the person that was right behind us, it was Tuesday afternoon. Hope had just got home from work. And we get a doorbell ring. Now, if you don't just walk into my house or kind of knock and you ring the doorbell, we're getting audited or something's wrong. Okay, I'm like, what's going on here? So the doorbell rings and I kind of perk up and I hear, hey, I'm your neighbor right behind the street. Behind your house. Is your husband home? And I naturally, and Hope too, I thought, oh shoot, it's about to go down, right? This day and age, we assume the worst, right? We always think the worst is about to happen, or this person's mad, or this person's upset. And so I come up there like a man, I'm like, hey sir, how are you? And he says, hey man, I'm your neighbor right behind you. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I just wanted to give you a heads up. My name is Dave, I think. I'm really bad with names. It was Tim or Dave. We'll call him Tave, okay? He's like, hey, I'm Tave, and I live right behind you. And I just wanted you to know there was that little gap in the fence. I just fixed it, but I know you have little ones that run around, and there may be some nails hanging out there. And so I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. And I can run back there and take care of it if you want, or you can kind of nail them down. but I just didn't want anybody to get hurt or anything, so you were aware that that happened. I said, oh, I gave him a hand, shook his hand. I said, oh, thank you so much, man. I'll knock him down, or I'll tell Hope to go do it, or whatever. And I appreciate that very, very much. And then he left. And I was so convicted. We have construction lights that shine into his house, okay? Like, I'm not kidding you. And I thought, but here he was just doing a kind gesture. We always assume the worst. I want to share a quick story also. It's actually my Devo I read just this morning. Jacob shared this plan with me. He said, read this Devo. And day 4 or 5 on this Devo, it tells a story about a lady who's reading a newspaper in the airport and had bought a bag of cookies. And she hears some rustling, and she sees this guy kind of look shady, kind of whatever. And he's eating a cookie, and she thinks he's eating out of his bag, out of her bag. And she's like, what the heck? She doesn't really say anything. She don't want to cause a scene when he keeps eating it. Well, it gets down to the last cookie, and he breaks it in half, and he slides half of it over her. And at this point, she is, what's this dude eating my cookies? And automatically assumes the worst, automatically gets emotional, automatically gets triggered, automatically goes from 0 to 100, all these things that we can relate to, and is looking at that dude like, what are you doing? And then looks in her purse and sees her bag of cookies untouched in her purse and realizes that was his bag of cookies. He was eating his own cookies and was trying to share with me. And in that moment, immediately she's convicted in this devotion. Is like, here I am, getting upset, how dare he? Now, don't get me wrong, don't go around grabbing people's food, okay? That is kind of weird. But in this case, she assumed the worst. I assumed the worst with this neighbor. We naturally do it. Here's the thing. Friendliness, forgiveness, kind gestures, etc. come off weird these days. That's odd. My neighbor, who every Friday night, we're out here being loud stuff, is just coming over to be nice. That's not normal. This guy was sharing his cookies instead of stealing hers. That's not normal. These days, nice things, kind gestures, forgiveness, all these things, we are surprised when someone just does something nice. We are surprised when someone doesn't get all emotional, doesn't get all upset, and these kind of things happen. Band, you guys come on up. I want to finish with this last story about Pete. What ends up happening with Pete, it's up north in Ohio, and things start to get cold, and it starts to snow, and the dog still barks, and they just agree to disagree, and they're not going back over there. They're still angry about it. The baby's still not sleeping because of this dog and all this stuff. And Pete is outside, and he is shoveling his driveway. Those of you who have lived up north, that's a part of life, right? You got to shovel his driveway. And he looks over, and he notices, it's a true story, it's really happening. He looks over, and he notices that same neighbor's driveway is covered in snow. And how many of us have been there? We're like, I should go do something nice. But I don't want to. Right? I don't want to go the extra mile for him. I don't want to go over there. I got my own schedule. And probably start shoveling even faster in his own driveway, right? You're thinking, his dog still barks, and he was rude to me on his porch. But the Holy Spirit was telling Pete, hey man, do something nice. We're going to have those moments where we're going to be felt led to go do something, a kind gesture. You're not supposed to go sweep his driveway when he was mean to you. You're supposed to get him back. You're supposed to shovel your snow on his cardboard, right? You're supposed to do these things. But instead, Pete, being a man of God, says, you know what, all right. And he goes over and he starts shoveling. And as he's doing that, this guy comes out that he did not recognize. And the guy comes out into the yard and says, hey man, thank you so much. My name is so-and-so. This is my brother's house. And he's actually at the hospital still, had to take over some chemo treatments, man. He got diagnosed with cancer. And obviously, immediate conviction, immediate okay, thank goodness I did this. He didn't know that. And the guy tells him how much it means to him and how tough things have been. Man, I know for a fact in this very room, a lot of us have gone through some tough times. A lot of families are stressed and busy and all this stuff going on. And we may not know all the details around us. But God's going to call us to do nice and sweet things. And so he finishes sweeping it off. He feels convicted and ends up going to visit him in the hospital. He ends up becoming good friends with him. This neighbor is healed and finally chemo works. And he goes back to his house and they become great friends. And guess what happened? The dog became mute and could not bark ever again. Isn't that incredible? No, that is not what happened, right? The dog kept barking and the dog was still annoying. And he said, but the story, the way Pete tells this story in this article is he says, but you know what? Even my wife, as tired as we were, knowing his situation, becoming good friends with him, we didn't get as mad. We weren't as upset. And we actually even heard him try to get his dog to be quiet a few times. But having a different perspective, going from an enemy to a friend, caused them to not get so so triggered, to not get so upset. And so our big idea, the main thing as we end this series, is this: love your neighbor as yourself, even if you don't like them. Even if they upset you, you've got to still love them. You've got to still be the church that God has called us to be. Amen? Amen.
We'll stand and worship on this place.
Some of you may not have seen what just happened, but in the true art of neighboring, in the true art of love, bitter SEC rivals, a Georgia fan and a South Carolina fan, just had a moment on our stage, all right?